Mark Rogers TV talking some Clemson football. Just about a week after National Signing Day, we bring in Mark Gordon from Shaking the Southland. Always enjoy the discussion with Mark. How you doing tonight?
Doing very good, very good. Thank you for having me on, Mark.
Of course. So you're used to these recruiting classes now. Dabo Swinney has made this just a thing that's just normalcy right now. Best class in the ACC, number 6 in the nation, according to the 247 composite. And this is the way of life these days, Mark. You bring in another haul of elite athletes.
And it's funny you say it. Emphasis on the word haul. If you look at a lot of the classes in the top 25, you'll see 25 to 30 signees there. Clemson signed 17, and I think the original plan was about 15 to 17. They signed 17 due to some of the transfers that decided to leave the program closer to National Signing Day. But Dabo Swinney and his quarterback coach Streeter recently came out and said, we want a Clemson offer to mean something. So Clemson's not necessarily going to oversign in situations like this. So we have 17 signees this year, and they've come out and they have extra spaces. They have the spaces. They come out and said, next recruiting class, they're shooting for 25. But it's a small class. But Dabo Swinney came out and said, hey, this is the most complete class that he's actually had since he's been a head coach at Clemson. And that means something coming up against, you look at a class like the University of Georgia, signing that many players, almost all of them 4 or 5 stars, just a class like that. And you have Dabo Swinney saying, hey, this is the most complete class I've had. It really is quality over quantity for him.
So when he makes that statement, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that he's filling needs and that he has the positions spread across the board in which he's not creating any kind of gaps going forward that he really needs to address. He has good distribution. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, that's correct. He and not only that, he reloads positions where you have some play. Yet now, obviously, you have the 3 players coming back. You have Christian Wilkins, Cleveland Farrell, and Austin Bryant, who it was a complete shock to me that all 3 of them decided to return to Clemson for another year of eligibility. They did it because they did not like the grades they received. Only 2 players on Clemson's roster actually received a second-round grade in the NFL draft, so all 3 of them came back. So you look at the 2 defensive end positions that are coming in. You have KJ Henry, the number 1 player out of the state of North Carolina, and you have Xavier Thomas, the number 1 defensive end and player out of the state of Florida. They're not going to get a lot of playing time. So it shows you how deep this recruiting class is that he's willing to make that statement. And you look at the need position. He goes and grabs Jackson Carman, an offensive tackle and the number 1 player out of the state of Ohio. You have Mitch Hyatt returning, but Taylor Hearn's leaving. That's a position where he can potentially fill in. On the defensive back was a big question mark. He goes and grabs Kyler McMichael out of Georgia. And on National Signing Day, one of the big things was it was still a need on National Signing Day, the second National Signing Day. And he went out all the way to Missouri and grabbed defensive back Mario Goodrich at Elise Summit, Missouri. He's the number 19 cornerback overall. Came down to Clemson, Georgia, and LSU. Clemson got in the game a little bit late on them because I think they realized they needed another quarterback in this class. And he ended up picking the Tigers over Georgia and LSU. And that really filled out the classic cornerback. There's one position I think that Clemson may have missed on at this point. I think it is the safety position. I don't think Clemson was fully prepared for Van Smith to declare for the NFL draft early. Leaves you in a position where you have Tanner Muse coming back, and you're looking at Isaiah Simmons at your other safety position. And I think Clemson may have been looking to potentially move him to the linebacker position or the nickel corner position because he's extremely athletic for his size. But I think that limits him to the safety positions where he was very adequate in that safety position. So I think Clemson may have wanted to get a safety and they just didn't get the safety they wanted. But otherwise, I don't see many needs that weren't filled in this small but powerful recruiting class.
Mark Gordon joining us from Shaking the Southland, the SB Nation platform for Clemson athletics. Of course, the basketball team doing well. We're talking football with another ACC championship banner hanging from the rafters soon there at the stadium. And it's the catch-22 for the elite programs that becomes more and more pronounced every year. You get the best talent in high school football, then you need to turn those over to the NFL a little bit earlier than maybe 10 or 15, 20 years ago when there were hardly any players that left early. Now I saw a total of somewhere in the 130 range hitting the Power 5 schools. But You beat that catch-22 when you bring in the NFL talent. They actually stick around for 4 years. The other thing that comes to mind with this just ridiculous wealth at defensive tackle and defensive end, kind of mirroring what's happened on the offensive side at wide receiver in recent years. I think maybe Brent Venables goes with, you've got your 4-3, your 3-4. Maybe he goes with an 11-0-0. Maybe that's the next try for a defensive setup. Just throw all those guys out there.
It really, and you know what? I laugh at that. Brent Venables is crazy enough to do that. He has some defensive coverages where he'll rush 2 and drop 9. He'll bring the house and leave 2 people in coverage altogether. But specifically with this recruiting class coming in, like we said earlier, no one was expecting the 3 defensive linemen to come back. So you're left with the 2 5-star defensive linemen coming in, and there's 2 other ones in this class. One name particular that I think you need to remember is the name Josh Belk. He was a U.S. Army All-American defensive tackle coming in. I think people consider him slightly undersized. I've heard that. I don't buy it. He's listed at 6'3", 309 as a freshman coming in. He kind of reminds me of Grady Jarrett from the tape I've seen out of him. He's been very impressive. The other name to think about is Justin Maskell. He's another defensive end coming in. He has incredible size for a defensive end as a freshman. 6'4", 237. He's coming out of Snellville, Georgia, and South Gwinnett High School. Those are 2, you're mesmerized by the KJ Henrys and you're mesmerized by the Xavier Thomases. Those are the 2 players that are coming in that I think they're going to push the 2 for early playing time. So your rotation on that defensive line, everyone's going to be fresh. Wilkins is going to get his. Dexter Lawrence is going to get his. But unless someone's running that high-tempo offense against Clemson, those linemen are all going to shuffle, and you're going to see some fresh pass rushers coming at you from every angle.
We are talking Clemson football. Of course, National Signing Day, 7 days prior to this recording, so we've got a recap in the books for you in regards to this Clemson class that ranks number 1 in the ACC, number 6 in college football, according to 247 Sports, with 17, as Mark mentioned, 17 signed, 9 already on campus. Out of the 17, I'm counting 12 that rank in the top 10 at their particular position in high school football.